and see this amazing and cool place called Hollywood. Hollywood's biggest secret wasn't about love affairs or crazy scandals. It was about how tall people were. For many years, movie studios lied to America about how tall their leading men really were. They built ditches on movie sets. They hired shorter actresses. They even paid for special shoes that made actors look taller every 6 months. One studio spent over $100,000 just digging holes so their star could look taller. Another studio had contracts that said co-stars had to be under a certain height. The public never found out. So, how did they trick everyone? Let's talk about it. Mickey Rooney. Mickey Rooney was only 5'2" inches tall. That made him the shortest leading man in all of all-time Hollywood. But for 3 years in a row in 1939, 1940, and 1941, he was more popular than Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, and Cary Grant. He made more money for MGM than any of them. His small height helped him play a teenage boy named Andy Hardy. Even when he was already in his mid-20s, people loved those movies. They made 16 films in that series, and if you count the money they made in today's dollars, they made around $1.9 billion. Mickey had a young-looking face, crazy energy, and a body that never looked like an adult. That mix made him the face of American hope during the Great Depression. People saw him and felt a little better, but the thing that made him a star almost ruined him later. When World War II ended, Mickey came back with a Bronze Star medal on his chest. He was a soldier now, but Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. He was no longer a kid, but he still looked too small to play a full-grown man. Casting directors started writing the same thing over and over again. Just 2 words: height problem. Love scenes became weird. He once joked he needed to stand on a box just to kiss his female co-stars. His $5,000 per week paycheck was cut. Studios stopped calling. By 1950, he was working for much less money in cheap crime films. But something surprising happened. He played a broken boxing trainer in one film and a worn-out fight coach in another. Both roles got him Oscar nominations. Suddenly, his small size didn't look silly anymore. It looked real. It looked tough. Then, in 1979, everything changed again. Francis Ford Coppola gave Mickey a new role. He played a retired jockey in The Black Stallion. This time, his size was perfect. Jockeys had to be small. The movie made $40 million. Critics loved him, and he got another Oscar nomination. He proved once again that no one could count him out. He had already acted in 43 films before he turned 25. Now, many years later, he was still surprising people. Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr. was only 5 feet 3 inches tall, but on stage he looked bigger than anyone else. He was born in 1925 into a family of performers. By the time he was 3, he was already on stage dancing with the Will Mastin Trio. He wore little shoes that had been polished to shine like mirrors, and somehow they always landed right on the beat. The crowd couldn't believe it. In the 1940s, nightclubs didn't want to book him. He was young, he was black, and he was short. Later, he would also lose one of his eyes in a terrible car crash. Too many people. He didn't look like a star. But Sammy didn't care. He turned every reason to reject him into a reason to clap louder. He could do everything. He'd play the drums like Gene Krupa. Then he'd switch to singing like Frank Sinatra. Then he'd dance so fast your eyes couldn't follow. And when people finally started noticing his height, he didn't hide from it. He made it part of the joke. I'm a one-eyed black Jew, and on top of that, I'm short, he'd say. The audience would burst out laughing. Then he'd make them quiet with a song like Birth of the Blues. Even in 1964, when he was cast in the Broadway musical Golden Boy, producers worried again. Sammy was 5'3". His leading lady was tall and Swedish. They thought it would look strange. Sammy didn't argue. He trained harder. He practiced boxing scenes until his punches were lightning fast. He demanded lighting that made his shadow stretch across the whole stage. The show sold out before it even opened. He got a Tony nomination. One review called him the littlest heavyweight in town. In Las Vegas, hotels once refused to let him stay there. By 1968, everything had changed. He was making $35,000 a night. His contracts said the audience had to be mixed races. He had to stay in the best suite. No one could say no to him anymore. That's how powerful he had become. He released over 50 albums. He had a Billboard #1 hit with the Candyman. In June 1972, he acted in 38 films. He got nominated for Emmy, Grammy, and Tony Awards. In 1987, he was honored by the Kennedy Center. In just 1 year, 1965, he raised about $750,000 for Martin Luther King's organization. That's more than most stars made for performing. James Cagney. James Cagney was never 5'9", no matter what the studio claimed. His army records said he was 5'5", and his biographers agreed. That made him 4 inches shorter than the average American man in his time. In the 1920s and 30s, that kind of thing mattered. Leading men were supposed to look big. They were supposed to tower over the bad guy, the girl, and sometimes even the camera. But Cagney, he had to be filmed from the knees up. Sometimes he stood on boxers. Sometimes he only acted next to shorter actresses, and even then people were told he was taller than he really was. The newspapers printed the lie like it was true. Meanwhile, Cagney laughed about it. He once joked that he had to jump just to reach his own punchlines. But the truth is, none of it ever held him back. He turned his small body into pure power. When he moved on screen, he attacked. In The Public Enemy from 1931, he slammed a grapefruit into Mae Clarke's face, then stormed around the room like a coiled spring. You couldn't take your eyes off him. That energy wasn't just for movies. In real life, he took on studio bosses. In 1936, he climbed onto a studio golf cart so he could look Jack Warner in the eye. Warner was 6 feet tall. Cagney was demanding equal pay with Edward G. Robinson. He got it. Directors learned fast that Cagney's size wasn't a problem, it was part of the power. Raoul Walsh even built a whole ending around it. In White Heat, Cagney runs through an oil refinery, climbing ladders and sprinting across catwalks, while explosions go off behind him. The camera follows him every step, ducking and weaving to keep up. No tall actor could have pulled it off without hitting the ceiling. The budget was over $1.3 million. The movie made all of it back in 6 weeks. Even when he played real people, the height never got in the way. In Yankee Doodle Dandy, he played George M. Cohan, who was actually 5'6". Cagney was an inch shorter, so the dance numbers were changed. His tap routines were sharper, tighter, faster. Some critics still talk about the way those steps hit like a machine gun. It became the movie's signature. By 1999, the American Film Institute ranked him the 8th greatest male star of the classic era. Nobody cared about his height anymore. It had become just a small detail. Edward G. Robinson. Edward G. Robinson was just 5'5". He didn't look like a Hollywood star. He didn't even speak English when he first arrived in New York. He was 10 years old, fresh off the boat from Bucharest, and the only languages he knew were Yiddish and Romanian. He wasn't handsome. He wasn't tall. And when he stood on a Broadway stage, no one thought leading man. Casting directors saw a short kid with a round face. But Robinson turned what looked like a weakness into a weapon. He stood in front of mirrors for hours, practicing the way his lips curled, how his eyebrows dropped, how his voice hit like a hammer. When people laughed at the idea of a tiny gangster, he barked back with a voice that filled the room. Then came Little Caesar. The date was January 9th, 1931. Robinson played Rico Bantlo, a ruthless mob boss, and something strange happened. Audiences didn't care how short he was. He owned every scene. He didn't need to stand taller than the other actors. His presence made them smaller. Time magazine said his 5'5" frame fills the screen with danger. That was no lie. Warner Brothers got nervous. They thought theaters might not buy a crime boss who had to look up at everyone. So, they faked his height. The studio said he was 5'9". They shot him from low angles. They made taller actors slouch or sit on stools. But the numbers told the real story. Little Caesar cost about $280,000. It made more than $1.5 million in the middle of the Great Depression. Robinson didn't just prove them wrong, he rewrote the rules. By 1933, Robinson was earning $85,000 per film. That's close to $2 million today. And he didn't just get a paycheck, he got something rare. Script approval, that was usually saved for stars like Clark Gable. But Robinson had earned it, one scene at a time. Off-screen his size became part of the story, too. During World War II, he volunteered for dangerous frontline USO tours. When asked why, he joked that a 5'5" target gives the Nazis half the chance. Behind the joke was something real. He was brave, and he didn't stop giving. Over the years, he donated more than $250,000 to anti-fascist causes. He also built an art collection worth $3.5 million by 1956. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was only 5'5" inches tall. That made him 4 inches shorter than the average American man in the 1920s. Back then, People thought movie stars had to be tall and commanding on screen. But Chaplin didn't care. He turned that idea upside down. He created a look that made him even smaller. Huge pants, a coat that was too tight, a little hat, a thin cane. This made him look like a child in grown-up clothes. But when he started moving, everything changed. He ran, spun, tripped, and danced with wild energy. In The Kid, he ran beside tall policemen. Yet, the